The Montreal Canadiens are back home, done with their 4-game road trip. There's another one coming in a couple of weeks, but there he is back home. It's Marco D'Amico from RG Media. Marco, good to see you again. How's it going, brother?
It's going pretty well, you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good because like the Canadians are kind of doing what I wanted, and I think it's all based on personal expectations. What you thought the team was going to look like going into the season, what did you think they were going to look like in the later stages of the season? So I want to get into all of that coming up. But welcome back, fresh off a 4-game road trip where the Montreal Canadiens had a 4-2 lead against Seattle, playing the second game in as many nights after taking care of business with the Vancouver Canucks. They play at 10:30 on Thursday at Climate Pledge. Marco, down 2-0 and then up 4-2 and then lose on a set play on a Brandon Martour record-setting 4 seconds into overtime game winner. Walk me through whether or not your glass half full, glass half empty in the aftermath of the Canadians coughing up the lead in the third and not taking all the points on the board in Seattle.
I mean, without, like if you're looking at the game in a nutshell, it's obviously a very disappointing outcome considering what you said that it was a 4-2 win. But let's not forget how absolutely outclassed the team was in the first period. I mean, I think Seattle hit like 3 posts as
Mm-hmm.
well. This game shouldn't have been in reach to begin with, and the fact that the Canadians walked away with a point is actually a gift, in my opinion. Unfortunately, just defensive zone coverage simply just could not own the middle of the ice. And again, that speaks to the weakness that the Canadians have down the middle, in my honest opinion, because covering the slot and access in on the rush made it extremely difficult for them to defend. And Seattle took full advantage of that. The only difference is Seattle's got its own problem on its defensive side. Like they have good offensive players in Vince Dunn and Brandon Montour, but they too suffer from the same issue where if you get them with speed on the outside, they have a very difficult time pivoting and trying to box you out, which we saw in
Right.
the first Uri Slavkovsky goal, and even on the second one where he was able to beat his man to the net and no one was covering him. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you kind of have those situations, but I feel like the Canadians are playing on house money right now, and basically anything you're getting is gravy. I mean, like let's call a spade a spade. I think it would be disingenuous that people thought that they would be 1 point out of a playoff spot at this point of the season in September, knowing, or even in November, right?
Right.
Knowing where they were, knowing that they had the Patrick Laine injury, the David Reinbacher injury, and seeing how things have played out. I think you look at a game like last night, I understand it's frustrating, but in the whole of it all, I think it's borderline miraculous the Canadians came out with 4 points, considering how short-handed they are within their roster and how they have to double shift that top line basically every game as of the
Right.
third period because they just simply do not have the quality needed to keep up in a race like this. I think the
And I'm
biggest takeaway I have,
go ahead.
the
Yeah.
biggest takeaway if I'm a Canadians fan, is just what would this team be if it had an average second line in the NHL? It would be to me, if your first line, if you're a one line team that's carrying you within a point of a playoff spot, I think the writing's on the wall on what this team needs. I think it's, with Ivan Demidov coming, I think it becomes even clearer where they need to add. But it just creates a situation where there's a lot to be hopeful for. And if you're the Montreal Canadiens management team, I don't necessarily think it's playoffs or busts. It may be it for fans, it may be it for Jeff Molson's pockets, but for me, in terms of watching this team evolve, I think that they have a good set of pieces in place now. I think Nick Suzuki is proving to everybody he's a number one center. I think Cole Caulfield is going to have between 35 and 40 goals this season, which is a successful season. And I think Slavkovsky is going to match at this rate his points totals from last year, which I don't think
Yeah.
anybody had on their bingo card when they saw him play in November. So
Well, I think that's
again, we've
fair. I
seen,
think
and then Lane Hudson basically pushing for the Calder. Like there's so much to be positive about, but within the confines of those two games against the Flames, who have Dustin Wolf and just an absolute stud in net stealing games for them,
yep.
and in Seattle, just the I think the biggest difference for them, and you saw it, is their strength down the middle is so much more mature than that of the Montreal Canadiens. They don't have a better center than a guy like Nick Suzuki, but they have four better centers and then some than the Montreal Canadiens do.
So, I mean, it sounds like it's glass half full to me in the aftermath of this 4-game window, because like I can understand in the big picture if you thought going into the season, oh, I'll take games that matter in March, but like I'm a big believer of pro sports team, and in this specific case, we're talking about the Canadians, it's a living, breathing thing, and that
Yeah.
changes all the time, the ebbs and the flows of a season. And I think the goalposts have moved. They have in my mind, anyway, about what I thought. And then they did some really good work. I love these self imposed challenges. Come out of the Four Nations break, it's unacceptable how they look going into the break. Coming out of the break, they go 5-0, right? And looking good, getting back into legitimately in the mix. And here we are on this Friday talking about a
Yeah.
Canadians team that is still knocking on the door. So when we look in through the window of just the 4 games, um, through Edmonton and Calgary, Vancouver, and then Seattle, the takeaway is glass half full, coming back home to play Florida on Saturday with a glass half full perspective, feeling confident despite leaving some points on the board. You believe the team feels good coming back to take on Florida on Saturday.
There's an old adage in hockey that I've heard from players, and that's always the first game back from a lengthy road trip is
Right.
generally a disaster. And unfortunately, you're playing one of the best teams in the NHL in the Florida Panthers. They may be ailing with Matthew Tkachuk and Brad Marchand out, but they're still a very dangerous team. So not to be taken lightly, but I think the benefit that the Canadians have, unlike other teams that come back from a lengthy road trip, is they have what 4 days off
Yep.
until the next game. Is it Thursday or is it Saturday?
The Panther game?
The Panther game is Thursday, right?
Saturday. Yeah.
Saturday. So they have a lot of time to
Yes.
recharge before they have to play that game, right? So
Yeah.
that to me is the only benefit and the one thing that may sway the situation because guys like Lane Hudson, guys like Mike Matheson looked gassed at the end of the game
Right.
last night. And I just feel for guys like that because they're unfortunately, it is what it is. And I think, with all due respect to the player, I think David Savard is very
Yep.
much a bottom pair defenseman right now. So that means that they're basically playing with Blaine Hudson, Mike Matheson, and Alex Carrier as arguably 3 top 4 defensemen in their entire roster. And then you're kind of playing with fire after that. So I I've enjoyed the pairing, for example, of Lane Hudson and um,
Struble.
Jaden Struble. I think that their advanced numbers have been excellent, and I think the eye test also shows the same. So I'd
Agreed.
keep those two together because I feel like Struble does really well at calming down the play. But I am a little concerned about the Carrier Matheson pairing, and it really what we see and what we saw yesterday I think shows how weak the Canadians were down the middle, but I think it also shows how much they miss a guy like Caden Gooley.
I think that's an excellent point. And we talk about Florida on Saturday at 7, the Ottawa Senators at the
That's
Bell
the important
Center.
game.
So
That's
let's
it's
let's narrow
Ottawa
that down then. So 3 of the next 4 games for the Canadians will be played at home. The one exception is Thursday next week. They play at Long Island against Patrick Waugh's Islanders.
on
So if I just
on.
ask you this, Saturday against Florida, Tuesday against Ottawa, again at the Bell Center, is the Canadian season on the line? Will you and I be talking on Wednesday about the Canadians living and dying based on how they do over the next 2 games? Or is that too dramatic at this point?
Um, no, because you could fall out of a race at any point, but you can also get back into it at any point as well, right? So I think if you were to have this conversation 3 weeks from now, it'd be a very different tone, very different story. You can lose a
Agreed.
season in 2 weeks at this point of the season, so it's completely understandable. But just to give you and fans an idea, right, as we talk about this, the Canadians are 18th overall in the NHL with 69 points in 65 games. 10th to last is the Boston Bruins right now. So
Yeah.
like if they were to be in the Boston Bruins shoes, the Boston Bruins are 1 point behind the Montreal Canadiens, and they are currently 10th to last. The Canadians are the last the first unwild carded team in the
Yeah, they're the
East, so
bubble
like
team.
ninth.
They're the bubble team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just to give you an idea of how tight that race is, because between the Canadians, there are the Rangers, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Boston Bruins. Those are 4 Eastern
Yeah.
Conference teams, and just Utah and Seattle and St. Louis in the middle that are chasing Vancouver and Calgary in that little race at the end in the
Mhm.
West. So Canadians go on a 3-game losing streak. They're suddenly in like ninth to last. So that's how wildly like this can change at any given point. But the same
Right.
can be said about the Ottawa Senators or the Columbus Blue Jackets. If they go and lose 3 in a row, like the Senators lost 5 in a row at one point, and that's what made the race interesting. And now they've kind of caught fire again. But when you look at the Ottawa Senators, they are 4 points ahead of the Montreal Canadiens with a game in hand. If the Canadiens want to give themselves the opportunity to leapfrog either of them, because it doesn't look like Ottawa is going to leapfrog Tampa Bay at this point. Those look like it's Ottawa,
Yeah.
Columbus, Montreal, New York, Detroit, and somehow Boston is still in this. Are the 5 to 6 teams that I see
Mm-hmm.
continuing to go at it until the end. The difference, I
Uh,
would say, is the strength of
yeah.
schedule,
Correct. Correct.
and I think
And when you look
that's the
through it,
key.
what did I think? I think I saw they have. I think they were 18th.
They're
After the
middle of
Seattle.
the
Middle of the pack. Middle of the pack.
yeah.
Detroit has one of the tougher ones. Teams like Boston, teams like Ottawa have technically easier schedules than the Montreal Canadiens down the stretch, right? And
The
just
easiest
for
schedule
yeah,
in the
32 out
league
of
right
32.
now,
Yeah,
yeah, is St. Louis,
that's it. Right.
which
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're a Montreal Canadiens fan is potentially a good thing for the Calgary Flames.
And just for transparency's sake, I just want everybody to know that Marco and I are doing this on Thursday after the Canadiens lost in overtime because Thursday night is a jam-packed out-of-town scoreboard. You got Boston playing at Ottawa, massive scoreboard watching ahead of the Canadiens playing and hosting Florida on Saturday. So as we wrap this up, Marco, and look forward to what should be a very interesting week with the two of us talking about what we think the future, and by the future, I mean the summer months, are going to bring to this
Oof.
marketplace as the Montreal Canadiens have money, they have prospects, they have picks, they have lots of ways to maneuver in order to get what I think we
Roster
all have in
players
the back of our mind. What's that?
and roster players.
And roster players. Well said. Looking for that to see. So that's coming up next week. But as we wrap up today, ahead of the Canadiens and Panthers on Saturday, and then hosting Ottawa on Tuesday, yeah, that might be the season right there. Um, I'm curious to get your perspective. It's something I've been kind of bringing to the table for most of the week because again, we went into the season with expectations, what you thought it was going to be like. For example, last year the Canadiens brought up the rear of the Atlantic Division. The Canadiens, after 82 games a year ago, had 30 wins, 3-0. They're at 31 as Marco and I speak today. So obviously there's growth collectively, growth individually. What's your educated guess? When Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes occupy a room with just the two of them in it, and they look at their team and they look at the individuals and they say, you know what, man, fist bump, we did it. Mission accomplished. We wanted to be in the mix. We wanted games that mattered. We wanted to see collective and individual growth. Check, 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 check. What do you think? You think it's mission accomplished? You think that's, I'm not saying they're satisfied, but what they wanted to do this year, do you feel mission accomplished?
I think as a head office, you're never going to say this publicly, right? So
Correct.
that's just something to keep into consideration. Not something that you would necessarily ride from a public perspective, but given the way
Oh,
things have gone,
never.
right? So
Yeah.
this is where I would say it. I think they're thrilled with the way that things have played out in general, just because it is a significant leap in terms of where they are in the standings compared to where they were last year, right? And I think the difference between at this point and last year is that after the trade deadline, they just went down in a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
aggressive way. And you're not seeing that right now. Now you're seeing them in the fight, going overtime, going this, going that. Obviously, last year, fans were getting a little upset because they were winning against top teams that they should have been losing to. But what's good for the goose in this case is good for the gander. They may be in the same situation here where they may be pulling out wins that most people don't have them pegged to win, such as a game
Mhm.
against the Florida Panthers, which they have 3 games against the Florida Panthers between now and the end of the season. Like
Yes, I
that
saw that. Yeah, home and home
that
too.
that may
Wow.
be it right there in
You're
terms
right.
of their season.
You're
If they can walk out with 500 just out of those 3 games, they're already in
yeah.
business. And they won the first game, as we remember, 3-0
Mhm.
shutout. or 4-0. I apologize.
4-0. Yeah.
So it does make a lot of sense. But to me, I think when you look at the way that the season has kind of played out, Nick Suzuki looks like he's going to hit a point per game. Cole Caulfield looks like he's going to hit 35 to 40 goals. Uri Slafkovsky is on pace to hit his 50 points that
Correct.
he hit last year,
Yeah.
despite a disastrous first half. Uh, and then you have Lane Hudson, who's
Oh.
on pace for 65 points as a rookie. So realistically, the Canadians have, without anointing a player too soon, because we all remember the Shane Gostisbehere situation
Yeah.
in Philadelphia, but they look to have their top pair anchor in Lane Hudson, so they can build moving forward with that. Caden Gooley looked like he was taking strides before his freak accident, so they're very happy with those kinds of situations right now. I can't sit here and say that it's a overwhelming success. I think they're a little disappointed on how things went with Kirby Dach. I think they're a little bit disappointed on how Alex Newhook has kind of played out. But in general, I think they're very happy, and I think they're very happy with
Yeah.
what's going on in Laval as well. So, in terms of advancing as an organization, yeah, they definitely took a step forward this year. And I think as a rebuilding team, that's what you want. You don't want to be a team that's seemingly, walking on ice, pun intended in this case, like the
Yeah.
Buffalo Sabres or like the Ottawa Senators were doing, the 3 years prior. So as
Mm-hmm.
long as you're bringing in difference makers, and those difference makers are helping you win and are committed to both sides of the puck, then as a general manager, you got to be happy with that, because frankly speaking, when you look at this team, some of their best assets aren't on the club yet. And so that only makes it more intriguing,
Yeah.
especially as we get into the offseason.
I think that's well said. Oliver Kapanen had an outstanding season in Sweden. Michael Hage nominated a big freshman for his NCAA
Yeah.
campaign with Michigan. Big 6'1", 200-pound center, had a nice season in college hockey. Jacob Fowler had a monstrous season for Boston in the NCAA. So I think that's a very well-made point. Let me end you on this one. If the Montreal
We didn't
Canadiens
even talk
are
about Ivan Demidov.
oh yeah, that guy too, right? If the Montreal Canadiens were a stock, would you buy their stock today?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I would
and
have I
hold
would have
and
bought their
hold and
stock.
hold
Yeah, I would have bought their stock probably.
after they fired Bergevin.
No, well, I mean, yeah, you would have been wise to do that. It was an all-time low, but I think, as if you're dealing in the market and whatnot, I think I would have the instance, and I know that it's not a popular name, and some members of the media have been a little harsh in this regard, but the instant that the Canadians were willing to take on $8.7 million net to take on Patrick Laine, that's when I would have bought stock, simply
Yeah,
just because if
yeah,
they're
yeah,
willing to be
yeah,
that aggressive in a
yeah,
year where they would like to be in the mix, what are they going to do next year when they expect themselves to be in the playoffs?
dude, that power play goal he scored against Seattle. I mean, Joey
Yeah.
Daccord looked
Well,
like a Honda Accord there. What are you supposed to do with that? I mean, holy
I
cow, man!
think I was more
Holy
impressed
cow!
with his pass to Alex
To
Newhook on
New
his
Hook,
goal
correct,
at five
dude.
on five than I
Yes,
was on a
yes,
power play goal, because he can do that on a power play. What I want to see is a Patrick Laine, and I think the
yeah.
Canadians probably agree with this, is a Patrick Laine that's going to be a force at least a positive impact player at 5 on 5.
Dude, what about New Hook on that play? Like the shimmy to finagle his way to the
So
front of the
this
net
goes
to get the
back.
pass? Like,
This
come
is a
on.
segment in and of itself, and I will petition
Yeah,
this till I'm blue in the face. But if
yeah,
I had to put either Kirby Dach or Alex Newhook at center and not on the second line, at center next year, it would be Newhook. Newhook to me, as
yeah,
much as his
yeah,
qualities and you watch him play screams winner, his most productive time with the Montreal Canadiens has been at center. Last year, when they traded Sean Monahan and he had to play center, he was putting on a significantly strong push at the end of
yeah,
the season. He was on pace for 50 plus points. The
yeah.
same, the same. I feel the same in this case. If you let him be the puck carrier, if you give him the puck touches, if you let him get involved in the game, he will produce in a third line setting. I think the Canadians are try to shoehorn him into a top six scenario, and I think that's what hurt him. But I think if you can slide him into the third line next year, especially with the lack of left shot centers this organization has,
Yes, yes.
and you can go and get whoever you need in that case as a second line center, having him as your third and shifting Kirby Dach to the wing, I think would be probably a better
Sure.
outcome
Look,
and
it
for
just gives
him
him more
personally and for the
time.
team.
Owen Beck can season more. Kapanen. I mean, who's to say? We don't know. We don't know if we're even talking about these guys, with the Canadiens or with Laval or with someone else, because Ken Hughes has moves to make this summer. I mean, stand by, Habs fans, because I mean, it is an awesome ride to be on, and we're well down the track now, and it's only getting more thrilling, in my opinion.
I
So
will say
look,
one thing
yeah,
about
go ahead.
that. I would be absolutely floored if the Canadiens traded Owen Beck. I will just say that.
Yeah, I need to see the return. Like Owen Beck, is
It
very
would
high
have to
in my,
be, yeah, it would
very
have
high
to
in
be
my
for a
opinion.
big name player. I don't think they're just gonna,
Correct,
trade him. But
correct.
if you're gonna get a legitimate, age
Yeah, yeah,
appropriate
yeah.
second line center and it costs you a first and Owen Beck, I don't think anybody's gonna complain.
Go offer sheet
Um,
Gabriel Velarde. Plays on the best line in hockey. Not named Nick Suzuki.
well, there's an argument to be had with that, and there's an argument. So, what
I know.
happens when you play on the best line in hockey? Are you the driver or are you the
Correct.
passenger?
Et voila. And who's Kyle Connor on the Canadians to play with Gabriel Velarde? Like Patrick Laine? I don't know.
Cole Caulfield?
But oh, Cole Caulfield, man. Cole Caulfield. What a player. Like, I don't want to end because there's so many ways we could go here, but you're out of time. I'm out of time. We've got lots to get to, and we will tackle it all together next week. So set those notifications, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss anything because the Canadians party, it's only getting larger, and you're invited. Marco, thanks, brother. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure.